Welcome to the Hiring Table, your weekly dose of hiring insights, airing Fridays at 12 p.m. Pacific.
Welcome to the Hiring Table podcast. Today we're discussing Famous ERP software with Adam Trujillo, a second-time visitor with Big Four audit and tax experience, a CPA license, and the right knowledge. Adam has lived a long journey from berries to global fresh fruit. Today we're going to get honest about where Famous shines and where it hinders farming companies in Central California. We're considering traceability, packhouse integrations, also valley operations can make smarter ERP decisions. What's great about Adam is his ag experience, working at Sun Valley, the Fruitist, and Frutura, all right here in our backyard. Welcome back, Adam. Where did Famous actually make your teams faster or more accurate, and where did it slow you down?
I think Famous has a very strong niche. It has a great moat in the ag space as far as ERP systems are concerned. Where they can help you shine is really, I believe, in their grower accounting. So if you're a marketing company here in the Valley that's trying to sell the fruit, I think they excel extremely well in that area, especially in the accounting part of that. I think they have trouble providing good data points and analytics right out of the box. My experience with Famous is that you are really forced as an accountant, an FP&A person, a CO officer to manipulate that data in other software systems, typically Excel, some Power BI, depends on how sophisticated you are as a company. But you have to have auxiliary tools in order to pull out the information that you really need as a business owner or a board.
Tell us a little bit about what you've done with Famous in terms of the hiring that you did and how you built your team around Famous for the strengths and weaknesses that the company had using Famous.
Yeah, of course. I was using Famous at Sun Valley. So I had an experience with that. At Fruitist, we started out with Dynamics, and then there was a special add-on that was called Link Fresh. And obviously they have strengths and weaknesses on both sides of the fence. But in order to migrate into Famous, which that decision came on pretty quickly from the board, then it was a transition into, okay, now I can go back to the system I'm familiar with, and now I know the deficiencies that I have to watch out for to hire the right people for the roles that I knew were coming.
What were the major milestones or projects that you're proud of when you were with the Fruitist?
So in terms of the ERP system itself, I think that was a huge accomplishment because we were transitioning into a software that originally was purchased but didn't meet the requirements of the CO. So we transitioned over to Famous. We did that while operations were still going on. As an organization, the most important thing is to continue operations without any kind of disturbance to the end result. So we had to parallel systems for a whole quarter. Then we had to work our reporting system out between what we were used to providing to the board and what the new phase was going to be. Because we were the first company in the business unit that was the Fruitist. It was a juggling act between communications with the other business units, the growers, communication with the retailers, and integration of this new software without disrupting any operations. So we were able to successfully do that within less than a year. So being able to successfully do that and maintain that level of service was a huge accomplishment with the tools and resources that we had.
And so the board, what was their feedback? How did it shift? They can make better decisions the more they know.
Correct. There was a lot of apprehension going into that move. So to do a 180 within less than a year was a tough sell for our CEO to the board. He was able to accomplish that decision making because he was able to prove out that Famous was a better product for our industry. And we had seen a lot of issues that we knew about versus issues that we didn't know about, which is what we were dealing with Link Fresh.
All right, so traceability under pressure. When you've had to do a mock recall or an actual withdrawal in Famous, did Famous give you a level forward, backward, answers in minutes? What broke?
So traceability is hugely important, especially when you're the marketer, because if something goes awry, you have to be able to immediately react and understand what produce is affected by that recall. But to your point, if you're mocking the scenario to make sure that you're in compliance and testing is a very crucial part of the compliance process. Famous does an exceptional job at that. They can keep the product at such a detailed level, a lot level, a box level, or even a clan level. You can mitigate your losses and segregate that affected product very seamlessly within the Famous platform itself.
Packhouse records and ERP, is there any gaps there that you've experienced?
Not with the packhouse part. I think Famous does a really good job at that. And the level of detail in which they go through is exceptional. It's the best that I've ever seen.
Grower accounting, pools, advances, deductions, grade packout pricing. Where does Famous model reality well, and where are you still in spreadsheets or custom code?
So I think the packing house and I think the grower accounting are one bubble in which Famous does exceptional. And I think other ERP systems are chasing them on those topics that I just mentioned. I think where Famous does does lack is on the sales side of things. So once you've grown, once you've transported, once you've gotten that product to your retailer, Famous does a great job at that. Once it's at the marketing level, that's where I feel like Famous can improve on their product. And what I mean by that is, yes, there's traceability. Yes, you understand if anything goes awry, but if you want the hardcore analytics of the sale itself, and maybe even the inventory itself, that's where it gets a little sticky, and that's where you're really having to lean on other software programs to pull that data from Famous and give it to the end user in a way that they can fully understand.
Top manual workarounds that you used personally?
Excel 95% of the time, but also the reports out of Famous are directly exportable. There's not a report in Famous that you cannot export into Excel. And another thing that's helpful with Famous is that you don't have to go and format too much. You get what you get with Famous, which is nice. The problem is that there's some reports that the detail doesn't flow through properly or at all. And so you have to basically Frankenstein 4 or 5 different out-of-the-box reports in order to get to the answer that you're looking for, which takes a lot of time and energy.
Excel seems to be the number one workaround. When you pull these reports down, what reports are most commonly merged together, and how do you combine the data to create better dashboards that are easily understood to management?
Financial statements as a whole are pretty good. You can just download the reports and format them however you want to see them. And you can also group different accounts to say, hey, this particular report goes to my board, this report goes to my salespeople, and then this report goes to the auditors. And Famous will allow you to build the GL, the financial statement line items, in a certain way that you can do that basically automatically. As far as sales is concerned, that is the one where you have to pull a lot of different reports together. So the ones that I'm most familiar with are the intercompany sales reports, the sales reports in general. So if you want to say, hey, I broke up this lot between Costco and Whole Foods and Aldi, and I want to understand what their price was to each one per lot, it's really difficult to get to that level of detail. The workarounds that I've found is out of the box, pulling your inventory reports, your grower payable reports, and your sales reports all together, finding a common denominator, and then pulling that data from each one of those reports to give you an end result report. As time goes by, that gets messy, right? You're dealing with scope increase, you're dealing with changes that might have happened after the fact, and all of that has to be managed and understood in order to be having a confidence level to give that report to the end user. Another workaround that has come about more recently is Power BI, which has been incredibly useful. The other problem that Famous, I believe, has is that they're not very open with their data. So you can go in the back door and do your data mining and pull that data out by force, or you can go through the BI model, or Famous offers a BI tool of their own, but I haven't been very impressed with that, to be perfectly honest.
Some people are set in their ways with their processes. Are you open to new technology?
I absolutely love new technology. I think AI has been a game changer for me personally, and I think the industry as a whole. I feel like business owners typically are less willing to adapt quickly, which I do understand. They're nervous to recreate the wheel. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But the alternative to that coin is that you're putting a lot of pressure and strain on your accounting and finance teams because of all the heavy lift and manual procedures that need to be done to give you a final product. So you have to weigh the pros and cons of that. I believe there is a trend to adopt it, but right now today, I would say it's probably 40-60 on people willing to adopt the technology and people are like, no, Famous has worked for us for 20 years. We're going to keep doing it this way.
For yourself, specifically to Famous, what AI tools have you used or what have you done with the Famous data?
From sales reports, you can just dump in the sales data that comes directly out of Famous, whatever AI chatbot you're using. Hey, I want you to analyze this for the last quarter and tell me the ups and downs, pros and cons. They can give you a high level, hey, these are your top 5 retailers. These are the seasonality, and then obviously the projections. Well, given this analytics that you just accomplished for me, if I project the next 3 months being this, with maybe these commodities going up and these commodities going down, what would be my end result at that point? So it's really hypothetical because it's already done within Famous itself, as long as you're keeping good accounting records.
If you were to give it a command saying, create a forecast based on this data, this number of years of data, do you think that AI is pretty accurate in reviewing?
Yeah.
So then what AI has done for you is taken over and taken away some of the time that it takes for analysis?
Yes. And from my perspective, that's where it should really shine. It should be analyzing data you already have kind of a sense for, making sure that you're on the right path or trajectory to get to where you want to be. But just like accounting, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So if you're feeding it garbage, it's going to give you garbage answers. You have to be very confident that the numbers that you are saying are accurate are truly accurate.
Talking about a warehouse management system, the ups and downs of that, collaborating with the staff you providing reports for from Famous, you're also managing their process to make sure the information that they're inputting is accurate. What could you share with us about the warehouse management system and financial reporting relationships?
It's hugely important. You can't be a marketer unless you have warehouses. You got to cool it, you got to receive it, you got to ship it out. So it's an integral part of the workflow stream. I think this is a good area where, again, Famous does a really good job. And the fact where you can trace, you can understand what is currently in the hopper to be sold. Out of that, what has already been spoken for, how fresh the product is, how long has it been sitting, what type of varietal it is, and what of your end result marketers wants that particular type of product. So long story short, it's a good planning tool specifically for sales, but the baseline data is coming from your warehouses. To receive it, Famous has integrated a really good system where you just can scan the barcodes, but they're pretty broad in what they'll accept. And I've seen it in practicality and it works great. You receive the product via manifest. You input it either manually or automated. It gets received where it needs to be. You check it, you do some quality control, and then you store it until it can be sold. And all of those steps in between are very automated and very detail oriented within the Famous platform.
Multi-entity global reality at Frutura. Intercompany multi-currency certifications. Did Famous keep up, or did you end up with the shadow Excel?
This is one of the issues that I think Famous has some problems with. Even if your grower and your marketer are using both Famous, it's still really difficult to trace, not from like a food safety perspective, but from an accounting system perspective. It's really difficult to take the lot that's leaving Peru, follow it through the ocean, have it get received, have it get shipped to your actual warehouse. And then once it's there, being able to identify every box that gets sold to whomever company, trace that back to the original grower's ERP system. Again, even if it is Famous. There's different reasons for that, mostly because there's so much data, it's hard to really get it down to the box level. The workarounds that I've developed using help from my employees and just understanding how Famous works is really detail oriented, but it can be done. Essentially what you're doing is you're taking a identifier, making sure that same identifier is flowing through both or the same ERP system from step one all the way to the final sale. And if you can accomplish that, you can utilize the reports directly in Famous to get to the answer you're looking for. For me personally, the reason that matters so much is because of inventory control. Essentially, if you're a marketer, you're either the agent of that fruit or you're the principal of that fruit. And depending on what you've decided as a company to how you're going to do your accounting, it's really difficult to manage that different agency or principal relationship without being able to trace, like I said, that fruit from start to finish. But there are ways of doing it if you can understand the system from a very detailed standpoint.
Could you give any advice, let's say, to the up-and-coming grower accountants here in the Valley?
Yeah, it's integral to not only the farming relationship that you described, but also for the accounting detail and accuracy. If you're recognizing revenue at the grower level, but GAAP tells you that you need to be recognizing that at the retailer level, that's a huge conflict of GAAP principles. So in order to realize that and to fix it for an audit or just to report correctly, you really need to back out those original sales and recognize them when they're finally sold to like a Costco or whomever. That is the biggest challenge that I'm trying to describe. And so the only way to accomplish that is to identify what that identifier is and then trace that all the way through the system. And for the grower accountants, not only the grower accountants, but for the receiving people, for the warehouse people, for the AP and AR people, they have to be cognizant that number always has to be present in order for that accounting trail and transaction history to be fully realized. If there's any break in that system at all, it is a real pain to go find it because of the amount of transactions that you're doing on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And the season lasts a full year. So if you've got a problem in day 1 or 2, that's going to transpose all the way through the end of the season, and that's going to give you a real headache.
Implementation and change management. Where were the hidden costs and the hardest roles to train, especially seasonal crews? If you had to do over, what governance or data standards would you set?
I think for the people on the ground, the warehouse individuals, the growers themselves, I don't think that's as much of a heavy lift because I think Famous does a good job of kind of making it user-friendly for those. I think where it gets sticky is the kind of the back office people. I think one of the best examples that I can provide is if you're an AR clerk, let's say, and you are billing out a sales order to one of your clients and you're inputting direct charges or even auto charges for that sales order. That might seem boring or easy to do, but if you do it wrong, that mistake will flow all the way to the GL itself. There's no intermediary module or any system within Famous that will not allow that individual to directly affect the general ledger. And I think that's the biggest departure from Famous to other ERP systems, that there's no real safety net embedded within the software itself. And a lot of other ERP systems have kind of recognized that and understood that. And so they have, let's call them safety checkpoints without the process, but Famous does not. And so I think that would be my biggest warning sign for anyone either adopting Famous or coming into Famous from a brand new staff perspective, is that you have to be very, very sure that what you're doing is correct, following standard procedures, and that you're confident with that. Because again, if you miss it, it's a real pain to try to go back and find that mistake. And what ends up happening typically is that you do averaging type of accounting, and so it'll pass an audit. But if you're wanting to be really precise and perfect, that is the key heads up, is that anytime you're doing any kind of manual transition or transaction, be accurate with it, because there's no barrier to entry.
What could you share as far as best practices for farming and Famous and identifying skills for up-and-comers?
Yeah, I think it helps to have a passion for the industry. Fruit, produce in general, I think is almost miraculous. It's such a cool idea that you got some dirt, you got some fertilizer, you got rain, you got sunshine, and now you're eating. So if you can share that idea with somebody else, they're more prone to put their heart into it. All those different transactions make the financial system. They produce the financial statements. It's those singular transactions that build to create, oh, this is what we made this month. This is our expenses. It's because of all those AR, AP transactions, the inventory flow, et cetera. So if you can instill that idea into the baseline employees and they buy into it, then you've gotten 95% of the way. If you're having trouble convincing someone that what they're doing is important, I don't know if you're ever going to win that battle. If you're just doing it for a paycheck and it's just like, yeah, I'm going to be checking my phone most of the time and just whatever, just meeting my standards so I'm not getting in trouble, that's always going to be a challenge for the managers to get through. I think your point is you have to kind of have matrix in your own mind and understanding of what's going to make this position successful before you hire on. It would be my best suggestion.
You're saying that's really important.
Very important.
The excitement for it.
Yes. And just in ag, you're dealing with like water rights, you're dealing with pollution, you're dealing with things like that. And I know, especially here in the Central Valley, I'm sure worldwide, but there's been a real push, which I love, for being conservative and not using as much resources. And I think that resonates with the younger generation as well.
From your EY audit lens, do Famous audit trails, controls, and BI stand on their own? Or do you export to Excel, Power BI for anything important?
For an audit purposes, Famous does a good job. I think the traceability of the transactions, who did it when, audit trails, I think they do a superb job. I've never had a problem with an auditor questioning my working papers coming from Famous. BI, I think they do a lackluster job, and I don't want to speak for Famous, but my perception is because they want to control the data that comes from their system. And in that, I feel like they're almost tripping themselves up because their clients have to use workarounds instead of just being, hey, this is what I need. Can you guys please just give it to me? And that, for me, has been the biggest pain point.
What are your favorite stock reports?
Detailed transaction report. That one will give me every single line item that has happened within a period of time. So if you're dealing with a ton of data, you might want to do it for a week. If you're dealing with just a few bits of pieces, you can run it for the month of the year. That one, to me, is exceptional because you can say, oh, here's the mistake or whatever. Here's what I'm looking for. And then you can go into a different module and then find that same thing using an identifier and then double click, drill into it. And it'll take you to the AP transaction or the AR transaction, whatever that baseline transaction is, it'll do it seamlessly. And that's really beneficial for my seat from an accounting point of view. And there's different reports that act the same for sales or for warehousing, but that to me is the bright shining star of Famous.
What did external auditors still ask you to rebuild in terms of reports that you turn in? You've been through audits with external Big Four public accounting firms.
I haven't really seen anything rebuilt. A good example is like an equity roll forward. There shouldn't be a ton of transactions within an equity unless you're doing a sale or something. But the report that comes out of Famous is just that, right? Here's your beginning balance, here's your debits and credits, here's your ending balance. What I've seen auditors really would like to see more is more detail. It's like, hey, did you have a dividend distribution? Okay, did you have a tax distribution? What are the details behind this? And so what I've had to do is say, all right, here's the direct report from Famous, and then here's all the different details from a different report and splicing them together to then give over to an auditor. And you can use that same example for like inventory, let's say, for AR. But from equity standpoint, I think it's just maybe easier to conceptualize. But that's the only request I've ever had from an auditor is like, hey, give me a little bit more detail behind this box report.
Retailer compliance in cash, EDI, scorecards, chargebacks. Where did Famous prevent deductions or rejections, and where did it leave you exposed?
I think the EDI platform within Famous does a pretty good job, and it's been adopted by every major retailer I've ever known. I think part of the problem happens, and this isn't Famous's fault, but these bigger companies like a Walmart or a Costco have their own system, or they're partner with a different EDI provider. And so it's up to Famous to then either adapt or cut them off. And I've seen instances of both. And so as a customer, what you're ending up doing is having to manage that EDI connection either via Famous, which you're then dependent on them and their time scale, or you're dependent on the retailer like a Costco or a Walmart, in which they can change on a dime. And you would have to then change your systems in order to comply with what they're asking for. So that's kind of the universe in which that we're living in at the moment. I think Famous does a good job given the circumstances. Where they lack is the chargeback stuff, because you're dependent on using their tools in order to provide that information to the retailer. And if they're not talking to each other as efficiently as they can, you as the customer have to do some of that manual lift to get your transactions to flow. Good or bad, that's just how it works in reality. I think they could probably do a better job, they being Famous, but given the circumstances in the ever-changing world, I think they do a standardized job.
Why do so many farming companies want to create their own software outside of Famous?
Because of the data analytics. That's the experience that I've had. It is a real pain to try to pull out data that you know exists. You've seen it. Like you were working in Famous. There it is right there. Why is it not flowing through these reports? Oh, that's a field that Famous decided not to put in it. Oh, it's too heavy from a memory standpoint. There's always an excuse from Famous's standpoint. And so that to me is where people go looking. It's like, hey, I need this. I've been very vocal about needing this, and I just cannot get it from you. So therefore, I need to do it myself. And I've seen different strategies on that. I've seen companies hire full-on IT people that have Famous experience to come in and literally just rip that information out and put it in some other database that is easily accessible. Or more recently, I think Famous has come around, and their first attempt at this is the Power BI. I've used their Power BI that they provide, not too impressed. And then I've also seen the Microsoft Power BI. Here you go, and you're responsible for uploading that data to it. That to me works better because you have more control of the fields that you can query. But those are the two solutions that I have seen in regards to Power BI.
People that are considering going to Famous but not in yet, that are in the farming industry, what's your advice to them?
Know the product. What that means is do your research, know what you need as a company, and then force Famous to tell you yes or no, and then go a step beyond. Not only tell them, yes, I can do this, or no, I can't. Make them tell you the best practice to get there. My experience with Famous and their consultants, very knowledgeable people, but they're very dependent on you telling them, I want you to do X, Y, Z. But the problem is that not a whole lot of people know Famous to that level. So you're telling them, I want this and that. Yeah, we can do that, which they can. But they're not telling you how to get there. And there's multiple roads to get there. And so that's where I see a lot of businesses get tripped up, is that they spend a lot of time and effort and energy, and then they hit a brick wall. And it's like, well, if you would have set it up this way, it would have worked great. Then why don't you tell me that? And that's been the biggest frustration that I've experienced with Famous.
How's been your experience with their customer service and getting back to you?
I think that's really good. And I say that being in the same state that Famous operates in. But I know that globally speaking, that can be a real challenge because they are 8 to 5 Pacific time. And if your problem happens outside of that, I'll talk to you in 2 to 3 days. And that can be a huge problem if you're talking about warehouse problems or a tracing issue or things like that. Personally speaking, never had a problem with it. And as far as their accounting module specifically, really, really great representation. They know exactly what you're talking about. They can screen share. You can show them, hey, this is the problem I'm experiencing. And I've never had an issue where an associate is like, oh, I don't know what this is. I'll have to ask. Every person I've ever asked, like, oh, this is what's happening. This is how to fix it. And it's worked out 100% of the time. So I've been very happy with that part.
Do you think that companies in the Valley that have maybe a negative view on Famous, do you think that they have this negative view because they don't understand Famous?
I think that's a huge part of it. But I don't know if that is on the shoulders of the user. I feel like Famous can do a better job at promoting what they can do. And if I had someone here from Famous, they'd be, oh, our website, go to the website. You don't want to do that. You're sitting there and your computer is just freezing up, or it's not giving you the answer you know is right. The first thing I want to do is call up and talk to another person. Hey, what is going on here? You're not going to want to be clicking through web pages and links trying to figure out what your problem is. And I think that to me is the biggest gap between practicality and what Famous is offering, is that they're not very proactive of like, hey, we understand what you're trying to do. We've got 3,000 other clients that are doing the exact same thing. Try this. Like, this worked for other people. This might work for you. At least give them that roadmap that they can explore themselves. But from my experience, it's been very tight-lipped, and it's just like, well, this is what we offer, so you guys can go ahead and figure it out.
You've worked with a lot of ex-Famous employees. You currently work with somebody that's been there for a long time. What has been the feedback in terms of the experience that you're having overall with Famous?
I think Famous hires good people. My sense of who they hire and their representation, I think, is really well done. They keep it local, they keep it in-house, they keep it in the US, which I think is really beneficial. And the people who come out of Famous always have good things to say about it in general. They're going to have goods and bads.
Why do you think they have these issues of not being proactive?
From my perception, I would imagine it's because they have a product that's been around for so long that they're apprehensive to change it. And I think that's a risk reward from a corporation standpoint that only their board can really decide where they want to go with it. If I'm sitting on the board and I have all the information around me, that would be my best guess, right? It's like, all right, it's a cost benefit ratio. We already have these clients. They're happy with our product to an extent. If we spent $1 million to get it to a level of, let's say, a NetSuite, would that pay off for us in the next 5 to 10 years? And the answer is probably no, is my best guess. I would imagine their biggest client bases are smaller operations that don't need the robust intercompany transactional consolidated financial statement need that we're forcing onto Famous. But on the other side of that ticket is you're an ERP system. And this is what the day and age is requiring of you. You should probably at least listen to what people are having to say about it.
You're hired as the CEO, and today's your first day. What would you change in your first day?
I would either partner directly with like a Microsoft or a very large software company to be able to give the power, or at least the ability of your clients to pull whatever piece of data they want. It's just my opinion. That is your data. You own that data. You've paid Famous the right to house and store that data. Why are you making it so difficult for me to extract that data in the ways that I want? That would be my biggest decision-making process if I was the CEO. Either make it open sourced or work with another company to at least give access to behind that data, the calculations, the algorithms, whatever it is that is driving that information, make it public. You own it. I don't get it.
For context, tell us about the company you work at, how big they are, how many locations. Quantify the company for us.
It's a large company. It's the biggest company I've ever worked for. It's 1.7 billion or so. We have 67 or so business units, growers, retailers, manufacturers that all roll up into the Frutura umbrella. We retail to everyone that we've talked about, Walmarts, the Costco's, the Sam's Clubs. We do all of that. And we're a global firm, which is, I think, hard to imagine unless you're living it. Not only time zones and language barriers, but data transitioning and different compliance with the tariffs and everything. There's a lot of global politics that play into that now that I don't think were as hot topic as maybe 15 or so years ago. But that's the evolution of any kind of company.
From an org chart standpoint, give us your accounting and finance org chart, just high level.
Yeah, so there's a CFO at every business unit, and there's approximately less than 10 business units that we have. So a pretty good amount of people that have an executive level title and responsibility. And then I don't know the exact number, but if I had to estimate, probably around 5,000 employees over the entirety of the business units. Internally, we are very lean. We don't do, obviously, any retail or growing personally.
How many are in accounting specifically?
Just myself.
Your scope of responsibility is over how many business units?
Everybody.
For
I'm the
company.
corporate controller.
You're the corporate controller for all business units. That's a big scope of responsibility for one person.
You have to give credit to where credit's due there. Like the business units themselves are self-governing and managed. If there needs to be a intermediary or a decision maker, then that's where my role comes in. Obviously, after speaking to the CFO and making sure we're aligned. But my main responsibility is to make sure that we are compliant with GAAP and that we can pass an audit without any big headaches. And I think that, to your point, is where it becomes challenging just because of the amount, the scope in which I'm dealing with. Again, they are very self-reliant and they do a really good job at doing the accounting and processes on their own. But yes, it's a lot.
How many hours are you working on average a week?
Depends on the seasonality. Right now, getting into audit season, so I'm working a little bit more. I'd say on average, probably 50 to 60 hours a week. But comparatively speaking to what I'm used to, it's very manageable for me.
Major major project success so far at Frutura?
A ton. We used to be a fund. Accountants will probably know what that means. If you don't, it's almost like a stock market. You don't realize gains or losses until you either sell or buy a company. And so it's a lot more broad strokes. My first year, which was last year, we decided to transition from that fund accounting to GAAP. And that was a huge lift. Now that's behind us. And this is the second year in which we're doing that. That's why I'm not as stressed or working as many hours as that, because that transition has already taken place. And now it's just maintenance. You've got a lot of technical accounting and things that you have to manage on top of the intercompany relationships and consolidation that is time consuming because of the volume at which you're talking about. That's why I love so much about it. I came from a business unit, either a grower or a marketer, and now I'm seeing both. And that experience has gone a long way in my current role.
Thank you for joining us this week at the hiring table. We are now shifting from agriculture into food processing and manufacturing, where industry leaders share the most valuable insights into hiring decisions, planning contingent workforces, and execution successes based on risk action taking. Join us next week for episode number 1, airing Fridays at 12 p.m. Pacific.